Lionel Richie's voice cracks as he recounts the moment he first glimpsed Nicole's face, tears welling as memory floods back. It wasn't a planned moment. It was a reckoning. He says that little face, those big eyes. And with that, a promise. I'm never going anywhere ever again. In releasing his new memoir, Truly, Lionel chooses to tell it all. The adoption, the heartbreak, the music, the pain, the love. He begins by tracing the early years. Born in 1949 in Tuskegee, Alabama, raised in a modest, deeply religious household, Lionel admits he grew up totally in fear. He didn't know what ADHD was. Sports weren't his domain. Each day felt like tiptoeing through uncertainty. Yet somewhere in the quiet, music whispered its possibility. He performed talent shows at the Tuskegee Institute, joined the Commodores, and found an outlet for the anxiety, the longing, the unanswered questions. He says music became his refuge and eventually his identity. In Truly, Lionel writes of a childhood etched with longing and restraint, particularly when civil rights marches swept through the South. He learned that while the world was heavy with injustice, his parents worried for their children. When his mother forbade him from joining a march led by Dr. King, he later asked, "Why did you not tell me?" He says he understood their fear, but the memory stayed with him, a tension between moral urgency and parental protection. Then he turns to the heart of the story, Nicole. In the early 1980s, Lionel and Brenda Harvey became legal guardians to a toddler named Nicole, whose biological parents were close friends, Peter Escovedo and Karen Moss. By the time Nicole was 9, Lionel and Brenda officially adopted her. He describes her arrival into their lives as a godsend, that little girl who needed someone to stay. From the first moment, he promised her permanence. He says, "Forget biological. I don't know the difference." She taught him patience, forgiveness, devotion. He says, "If I've ever met anyone in my life, Nicole was the one who actually taught me how to fall in love." He doesn't sugarcoat the challenges. When Nicole was a child, he would travel on tour, and even at recitals she attended, audience members would whisper, "Lionel Richie is here tonight." The weight of fame pressed into their family life. He remembers pleading silently, "Give the kid a break." He admits that being a present father and being a public superstar sometimes collided with devastating intensity. The drama of his personal life emerges most starkly around the infamous 1988 confrontation. Separated from Brenda, Lionel had sought refuge. He says he hid at a beach house, trying to decompress. One morning, he drove to see Diane Alexander, the woman who would become his next wife. The knock came. Brenda stood at the door. What followed he describes as the most awful screaming match of my life. He watched it all spiral. Attempts to leave, arguments intensifying, neighbors calling police. Charges were filed, then dropped. He called it the scandal of my century. He confessed that for all his efforts, that day changed everything. For him, for Brenda, for their marriage. The marriage, once hopeful, fractured permanently. They divorced in 1993. He acknowledges Brenda as the mother who stood firm, the steady partner through early years, the co-parent who raised Nicole beside him. Later, he married Diane Alexander in 1995, and they had Miles and Sophia together. But that chapter too unraveled. They divorced in 2004. He writes of the slow attrition of affection, of distance, of competing demands. Yet he remains grateful, recognizing how each relationship shaped his capacity to love, to fail, to heal. In promoting Truly, Lionel's emotional reveals continue. On Good Morning America, he told of growing up in constant fear, of not understanding who he was or why he didn't measure up. He said he sought to fake it, to find in himself things he didn't yet believe existed. He credited mentors and teachers who nudged him, but more than anything, he leaned on music. He never learned to read music. He didn't always understand theory, but he carried rhythm, melody, heart. He also shared that in his early career, he'd seek out fans to eat meals with him, afraid to be alone, even when surrounded by crowds. He says the stage became a place not just of performance, but of solace. He reveals surprising details. His parents prevented him from marching in civil rights protests, preserving a safety he later resented. He recalls nearly pursuing the priesthood, feeling called to serve, only to have his path shift when a fan told him, "Sing it, baby," and everything changed. His spiritual impulses never left him. They simply transformed into song. In the memoir's audiobook, narrated by Blair Underwood, with Lionel reading the introduction, listeners will walk with him through the unfolding chapters of fame, loss, redemption, faith, fragility, and legacy. Throughout Truly, Nicole remains his anchor. While public life demanded strength, she demanded tenderness. He speaks candidly of his regrets, of moments when he was absent, of times when he let expectation overshadow presence. Yet, the love he carries for her never wavered. He says he wept writing parts of the book, excavating memories he'd protected too long. As the narrative closes, Lionel frames this as more than confession, as a gift, a chance to show that even those who make the grandest music carry scars, a believing that in telling the truth, catharsis waits. A final message: you are never alone in your struggle, and the wounds you carry can become the songs you leave behind. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more celebrity updates just like this.